Hello, I'm Crystal Petry. Welcome to another episode of 60 Minutes With. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, make sure you subscribe to my channel right now. On this week's episode of 60 Minutes With, I am sitting down with a sushi chef. You heard me correct. Sushi chef. And we're going to talk about how rare my guest is in this space. So, welcome to the podcast, Marisa Baggett. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am, and I've been telling you this. I feel like every time I talk to you, I tell you how excited I am to have you on my podcast because, oh my goodness, you have so much to talk about, the community that is the sushi community, but also some individual communities that we'll get into. So where in the world are you, Miss Marisa?
So I am in Tennessee. I am in the Nashville area, just recently relocated. So that's always fun. Spent a lot of time in Memphis. So just kind of down the street.
Excellent. Excellent. When you said Tennessee, I thought about that joke. I don't know if you've heard it. You probably have when the guy's like, where are you from? Tennessee? Because you're the only 10 I see. Oh my goodness.
Nice.
Yeah. That's normally coming from a guy. It's so funny.
Yeah. It's been a while since I've heard that joke, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's hop into this podcast so everyone can see why I'm so excited to have you on. Obviously, Marisa, you are a female. You are also African American for all of my podcast listeners on Apple who are just listening. So Marisa is a female. She is African American, and that's very rare in the sushi community. So I did the numbers. There's 21% female sushi chefs and 7% African-American sushi chefs. So those numbers are daunting all by themselves. Wow. My first question for you is, how did you become a female African-American sushi chef?
All right, let's see if we can shorten this because we could talk all day about just how I came into the sushi space and how I even got started with sushi. But long story short, so I've been at this for a while, for about 20 years, actually a little bit longer. I actually had a restaurant in a very small town in Mississippi that I grew up in, Starkville, Mississippi. And at the time, there was no sushi in the town. There was no sushi anywhere nearby. And I used to do a lot of catering. And a good client of mine asked, can we buy out the restaurant for the night and have a party for our staff? And I was like, that sounds fantastic. Of course. What are we serving? And he goes, I'd like to really treat them to sushi. And I'm like, yeah, okay, that sounds great. And then after we got off the phone, I was like, oh my goodness, what did I just say that I was about to do? Like I had no idea what was happening. And this is going to age me, but there was no Google that I could go to at the time. There weren't a lot of sushi cookbooks that were sushi specific. So I actually had to go to the library and find books on Japanese cuisine. Long story short, figured some things out, did not use any raw fish because I was like, I'm not killing anybody because I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
And we put this party together, and in the process of doing all that, I just kind of fell in love with the idea of becoming a sushi chef, and so I did. I despite a lot of people telling me that this was not a great idea, I did it anyway. I found a little school in Los Angeles, and I went out to Los Angeles to study sushi.
Now, when the man was saying we want to have this party, we want to serve sushi, did you know how to make sushi? I know you said you had to go to the library because there was no Google, and people probably can't even remember a time when there was no Google and you actually had to go to the library to check out the books. So did you know how to make sushi? Had you eaten sushi before at this point?
I had never even eaten sushi before. The only thing I knew about sushi was like that scene from what is it, Pretty in Pink, where Molly Ringwald's character, or no, The Breakfast Club, where Molly Ringwald's character brings sushi for her lunch, and I was just like, oh, that's kind of cool. That was my whole reference of sushi.
Yes, yes. So, okay, how did the sushi turn out? Did you get rave reviews?
This was like I mean, this is probably one of the reasons why I believe in destiny because for whatever reason it worked out. Like I was reading all these things in these cookbooks and about Japanese cuisine and I'm like, I don't know where we can get that. I don't know where that comes from. I don't even know what that is. And so I'm just like making things up based on, items that I can find with around me and just saying, you know what, we'll apply the spirit of sushi to this cuisine and this is what's going to happen. So what ended up happening is, like I said, it's a small town. So people heard and we had people calling us and they're like, hey, if you have any leftover sushi, call us, we'll buy it.
What?
I'm like, now that I think about that, I realize how ironic that is. I mean, you don't really have leftover sushi, but
Yeah.
people kept calling, and I was like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna start doing like a once a month sushi night. And that turned into like once every other week, turned into once a week. And it just kept like snowballing until I kind of just was doing some version of my Southern style sushi all the time.
Oh my goodness. Why did you fall in love with it? It seemed like to me that the love affair started quickly. Like it wasn't like a long drawn out
No, it wasn't.
situation. So why do you feel like you fell in love with it so quickly?
It was really cool. I think that I tend to be drawn to things that are unique and different and that require a lot of thought. Um, you know, there is a lot of thought that goes into sushi, and there's a lot of like there's some philosophy behind it if you want to go that deep. And I don't know. I think I was just drawn to the I'm going to put air quotes around it simplicity of it. It's a very simple cuisine, but it's also very deceptively simple because there's a lot of thought that goes into it, and I like to think about my food, and
Okay.
it really it was pretty to look at, and it was pretty to think about, and it really captivated me, and it still does to this day.
Marissa, when I say you are a sushi chef, what does that mean to you and how does that make you feel?
Well, it makes me feel like, yes, you recognize that I am a sushi chef. I think that we give that title to a lot of people who happen to make sushi. And I don't think that everyone who makes sushi is a sushi chef. For me, in order to be a sushi chef, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have had to gone to school or trained traditionally to learn how to make it. But I do think that there are fundamental things that you have to know about sushi in order to be able to call yourself a sushi chef. Um, there is a basic understanding of certain Japanese principles, Japanese cuisine principles that I feel like you just have to know and grasp in order to be called a sushi chef.
So, okay, let's talk about that a little bit more. So, of course, from my understanding, from your understanding, I think from the majority of people's understanding, when you think sushi, sushi chefs, you think of Japanese chefs, Japanese community, majority Japanese community. Of course, you are one of the very few African American women that are in that community. But a lot of people say, if you can see someone else do it, then that means you can do it. If you can see it, you can believe it. It's a lot of tropes and a lot of sayings like that. who did you see that you were like, okay, they're doing it, she's doing it, he's doing it, I can do it. I know that I can do that. Did you see anyone like that, or was that all just internal for you?
It's so funny you asked me that because that didn't come until after I became a sushi chef. So everything that led up to me actually becoming a sushi chef was all an internal vision. Like I'm in the middle of Mississippi before I become a sushi chef, and it was a 3 or 4 hour drive to even get to a sushi bar. So
Wow.
I hadn't gone to a sushi bar before I decided to become a sushi chef. I'd never been to a sushi restaurant. The only sushi that I'd ever eaten was that I made at my restaurant. And so I think that I have a very active imagination. And I just really envisioned myself, doing this thing. And I think that might have actually helped me out in the beginning, not having someone to look up to or to talk to about this before I decided to go and become a sushi chef. Because had I done that, I might have realized how crazy this notion was. It's so true. It's one of these things where I kind of didn't know what it was that I was doing. I was very naive.
Which
Very
a
naive.
lot of times people say being naive in something is the best part of it, because you don't know how hard it is. You don't know that it's possibly impossible. Is the naivete that helps you and protects you and
Yeah,
keeps you going along the way.
yeah, it definitely did for me. Yeah, no doubt. Like had I known some of the things that I know now before I went to sushi school, I may have thought twice about going.
Marissa, if people, and I have done this, I'm going to be honest, but if people want to follow you or connect you, I know you're on Instagram, on IG, how could they do that?
Yeah, so I'm on IG as Chef Marisa Baggett. And I also have a website, marisabaggett.com.
Okay. Um, Now, my next question is, you said you went to school, you found a sushi school in Los Angeles,
Yes.
but you're in Memphis. Okay, connect the dots for me here.
So before I went to sushi school, I actually moved to Memphis. So I had this notion, it was kind of crazy. I had this notion that I was going to become a sushi chef, and I didn't have any support in Mississippi. People are like, "You're so crazy. This is like the silliest thing I've ever heard." And I'm like, "Okay, well, you're crazy." And so I decided, I was like, and I'm kind of done with like small town mentality. So I'm going to move to Memphis and work for like a year, and then I'm going to go to sushi school. The idea really was to try to find a sushi bar to work at, but what
Mhm.
I ended up happening was I got hired at this really amazing seafood restaurant, and I was hired to be the like pastry person, which was really fun. I actually adore sweets. Before I decided I wanted to be a sushi chef, I actually imagined myself as being one of those like over the top cake people. That was like the thing that I was gonna do, and then sushi captivated me, so that just like flew out the window. But yeah, so I worked at that place, and I went to sushi school after I was there for a year. And I actually never planned on coming back from LA. I thought, I'm going to go out to LA, I'm going to learn how to make sushi, and I'm going to work in a sushi bar or a restaurant or something out there. And just so happens a friend of mine called me while I was at school and said, "Hey, you're never going to believe this. Someone in Memphis is opening a new sushi bar that's not run by the one company that runs all the other sushi bars, and they are looking for a head sushi chef." And I'm like, "Well, I'm still in school and I don't know enough about becoming a head sushi chef, And they were like, "Well, just call them and talk to them." So I called and I talked to this woman, and again, fate. They'd hired this, older Japanese guy who was, going to run it, and I was going to work as his second. And for whatever reason, he didn't work out, and I graduated sushi school with a head sushi chef position.
Wow, that's unheard of. Like, even I know that. Even I know that's unheard of.
It was crazy.
What? And
Yeah.
how long did you okay, how long is sushi school? Is it a year?
No, so ours was it was a very intense 12 weeks.
Wow, okay.
And when I say a very intense 12 weeks, like when I look back at it, the amount of things that we did every day for 12 weeks, you could easily split that up into a year. We, you show up, class started at 7:30 in the morning, but you had to be there before 7:30 because you had to have your knife sharpened. You had to have the rice made so that we could start class. Class went until noon. We had a lunch break. And then after that, we had Japanese language lessons so that we could learn culinary Japanese and learn more about these principles of Japanese cuisine. And then at night, you were expected to intern at either one of the school's sushi bars or help with some of their recreational cooking classes or their catering.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like a lot.
It was a lot. Like,
It's
anybody that came expecting to do anything else besides, be immersed in sushi, they were very disappointed. Some of my classmates were like, "Oh, I thought I was going to have more time to just hang out in LA." And it's like, yeah, that is not what they expect us to be here for.
wow.
Yeah.
Is being an African American sushi chef lonely?
Mhm. I would say it's lonely. Not just because I'm African American, but because I'm a woman. The sushi space, while it is opening up to women, I mean, just the restaurant industry in general, um, kitchens are still very male dominated.
Yes.
And with something like sushi, it's still pretty male dominated.
Mhm.
And so when you walk in as a you walk in as an African American female, they're just like at first I'm not even sure that it registers to people because they're just like, it's just like this thing that they just can't fathom, or they're just like, oh, okay, the pastry chef's here, or and it's that sort of a
Yeah.
thing.
And what is your response to that when people are, verbally surprised, non-verbally surprised, but their face can't hide it that they're surprised, or they're thinking you're the baker of the restaurant? Like, how do you handle that?
The best way I found that the best way to handle that is just let the food speak for itself. You know, a lot of times I won't say anything. And
Mhm.
when I go into sushi mode, it becomes very obvious.
Okay.
Yeah.
Someone who is listening or watching this podcast, may be thinking that's what I want to do. Like, I want to become a sushi chef. What do you think, or what can you tell them is the first thing they need to do or buy or read? What do they do?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is find a good person to study under. You can read all the books in the world, like I did, but until you go and you actually learn from someone, that's whether you go to a sushi bar and work, with sushi chefs there and, do like an apprentice style thing, or if you actually find a good cooking school. Unfortunately, the one that I went to is closed now, but there are a couple of other sushi specific schools in America, and I definitely think that they're worth it. Because the things that you would learn in a sushi school versus just working at most sushi bars is it's going to take you to a different level.
Okay. Is it expensive to learn to make sushi?
I would say that it's not expensive to learn to make sushi, but depending on how involved you want to be in the craft, it can be expensive to get started with like buying your knives. A sushi chef's knives are absolutely essential to the craft, and they're not cheap.
What kind of knives do you use?
Yeah, so you use Japanese carbon steel knives, and carbon steel knives are a little bit different than the typical knives that you would, that you see most chefs using. Carbon steel knives are not, there's a reason they say stainless steel. Carbon steel knives are not stainless steel. They do rust. You have to learn how to take care of them properly, because they're actually fashioned and forged similarly to a samurai sword. So they're beveled on only one side, and so you only sharpen one side. It's a whole other ball game. And if you're left-handed, you have to get a special set of knives that are forged on that side for when you make cuts. It's just totally different than the straight edge knife that you're used to getting, and they can go from being expensive to uber expensive. But the good thing is, the reason why they're so important is that carbon steel holds an edge longer than your typical stainless steel. So you can actually get the knife sharper, and it stays sharper much longer.
Oh, okay. Okay. When with sushi, do you make sushi or do you cook sushi or is it both?
Ah, so I like to say that you make sushi. I would even go so far as to say that you craft sushi. Um, at its fundamental core, it would be correct to say that you cook sushi, because sushi just means the rice.
Oh,
And
really? Is that what sushi means? Rice?
it means the special vinegared rice that you use to make the rolls and the other things. So when people are like, "Oh, sushi is just raw fish," and that's actually not correct. Sushi can include raw fish, but sushi actually means the rice.
Okay.
Mhm.
Man, you're teaching me so much. And I'm sure my audience, I had no idea because when I think sushi, I think the fish, the rice, and then whatever it's wrapped in.
Yeah,
Whatever it's
yeah,
wrapped in. Okay,
yeah.
so what are the main ingredients in sushi? I'm assuming the rice.
Yeah, so I mean, it's really, really the main ingredients in sushi are the rice. I mean, so when we think of sushi in America, we tend to think of rolls.
Right. Yes.
America sushi culture is very sushi roll driven. So you've got your sushi rice, and you've got your seaweed that you wrap the rice with. And most of the time, when people think of sushi, they're thinking of some sort of raw seafood. Um, and occasionally some vegetables. We don't always love our vegetables so much in America, but that's what we think of. But in other places around the world, when people think of sushi, they think of the little rice balls that have something draped over the top, because their
Okay.
sushi culture is not so roll driven, and that's definitely true in Japan.
Have you ever been to Japan and maybe made
Not
sushi?
yet. Not yet.
Oh, okay. Definitely on your bucket list though, right?
It's so on my bucket list. There's so many sushi things on my bucket list that I want to do, but yeah, going to Japan and doing that is definitely on that bucket list.
Marissa, as a sushi chef, are you always learning to make sushi?
Yes. So that is the thing that I also think, even though I've been out of sushi school for 20 years. So I don't really count the time that I was making sushi before I went to sushi school, because I would not say in any shape, form, or fashion that I was a sushi chef at that time. I think when I went to school, I committed myself to this idea that I was going to be continually learning about sushi for the rest of my life.
Okay.
And, even if, and people are like, well, you've been doing this for 20 years now. So what else is there to learn? And I find that I'm learning a lot about the things that I think I already know. So when I say that, for example, something as important as how to cook rice. Would I say that I know how to cook sushi rice? Absolutely, because it's an absolute fundamental piece of being able to make sushi. But there's so much to it. You could literally spend a lifetime learning about rice and learning specifically about sushi rice.
Really? Okay, so
Yes.
what is the difference between sushi rice and just the rice that I feel like most people think of? You know, you have your rice cooker, or you throw it in the microwave, or you cook it on the stove. Like, what's the difference?
Yeah, so the big difference is for sushi, the rice that we use is a short grain rice. Um, if you're in Japan, you use Japanese short grain rice, but actually, California grows short grain rice. So you always use short grain rice because the polish on the short grain rice is a little bit different than the typical rice that we use, which tends to be medium or long grain. And that's what helps to contribute to the sushi rice's stickiness.
Okay.
Mhm.
And do you put anything else in it besides water?
So here's where this is what I mean when I say that you could like spend a lifetime with the rice. So for my purposes, I typically don't add anything in the water when I'm cooking the sushi rice. But
Okay.
there are other things that you can add to give subtle flavor, like there's a type of seaweed called kombu, and some people like to put a little piece of that in the water with the rice while it steams because it gives it a very subtle ocean flavor. Um, and this other, what they call the sixth taste, umami.
Okay.
So kombu actually, there's this little white film on top of it, and it's actually natural MSG. And people are all just like, oh, MSG, oh, it's so bad. But it's interesting because it actually occurs naturally in certain things, and a lot of Japanese cuisine uses these things to give that flavor. So it has this kind of subtle taste that you can't quite put your finger on, but that's what it is. It's MSG. It's natural MSG.
How many different types of sushi are there? Can it be counted?
I'm not sure it can be counted because you have to take into account the new things that people are creating. But I think that, there are a few fundamentals like there's pressed sushi where you press sushi rice into this little wooden box and put
Mhm.
toppings on top and then you cut it. There's the sushi rice balls that I was talking about with the things draped on top called nigiri. There's another type of sushi rice ball called tamari. There are hand rolls. There are, all these different types of rolls where the seaweed plays different parts or the various thickness of the rolls. Um, and then there's types of sushi where you actually put rice in a bowl and make little pretty presentations of ingredients on top. And it just goes on and on and on.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so the fish or like the seafood that you put in your sushi, is that something you could just buy from your local grocery store?
Yes and no. So it's interesting because with the way shipping and things work, everyone kind of has access to everything. So if you live in a place where there's a Whole Foods or a nice upscale kind of grocery chain like that, then you will be able to find seafood that you could put in sushi.
Okay.
Yes. Would
And
I
if
recommend that you go to like your local like Kroger or other like, mid-tier grocery store for seafood for sushi? I mean, if you cook it first, I'm sure that would be fine.
yes. I could tell by your like inflection and your tone, you're like, maybe not, but I'm not gonna stop you.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because a lot of these grocery chains actually use some of the same suppliers that sushi restaurants use.
Okay.
Now, how they handle the seafood when they get it is a different story.
Yes, yes. Can you tell us just a little bit, and I'm sure it's probably very long and extensive, a little bit of the history of sushi?
Yeah, so sushi actually started as a way to preserve fish. um, a long time ago when there's, no refrigeration, people were always looking for ways to, preserve food to make it through times where, you couldn't go out and fish because maybe it's too cold or the lake's frozen over. So what would actually happen is they would bury the fish with, and cover it with all this rice. And so the one thing that kind of was always in the back of the culture's mind, because rice was so important. Rice is so important in every Asian culture, not just Japanese culture.
Mhm.
So this idea that you would use something to preserve the fish, but then throw it away later, it's kind of like, you know,
Yeah.
yeah. So it just over time, it kind of became this idea of, okay, well, how can we keep the rice and not throw it away? And so the emphasis on what to do with the rice actually became so important. And that's where sushi became like, this is all about the rice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And rolls were really not a thing. I mean, it was like your this fish that they were preserving, and pressing in between these things of rice, as time went on and they started using vinegar to kind of like sour the rice, but still be able to eat it. The fish was just kind of like the secondary, oh, this is a nice little thing to go along with. It's interesting because some of the most expensive parts of the bluefin or the big tuna that people like so much in sushi bars, the fatty tuna belly, it was never really eaten a long time ago. People used to cut that off and throw it away or feed it to their cats.
What? And now people are paying ridiculous sums of money for that.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So there you go, cat food.
Cat food, absolutely. Marissa, what do you think the future of sushi looks like?
I think the future of sushi looks plant based. Unfortunately, because of the popularity of sushi and because we're not, and I say we as like just like the world, we're just not great with wanting to have things in season. And so we do things and do practices, promote practices so that we can have what we want when we want it. And unfortunately, that's not great for seafood species. It's not great for the oceans. And for several decades now, I mean, I remember being at the very beginning of my sushi career and starting to become a little concerned about, what's going on with all this seafood, like it's a little scary. And as the sushi economy continues to grow, it becomes even scarier. So I think that if certain species don't start going extinct, if we could, curb some of that with some of, by going more plant based sushi, I think that would be good for everyone.
What is your personal intention in this space? In
Mhm.
the sushi space? What is your personal intention?
Yeah, so I would say that my number one intention is education. I'm because I am a unique sushi chef, for whatever reason, people feel comfortable asking me a lot of questions that they may not ask someone that they consider a more traditional sushi chef. Sometimes we can be a little scary, but people have always felt very comfortable asking me questions. And so I love educating people about sushi, whether that's, teaching people how to make sushi at home just for fun,
Mhm.
or talking about, what sushi is, giving demonstrations, and I especially love doing anything to promote plant-based sushi because I do think it's the future. Um, yeah, and that's my intention is to just educate.
Well, I definitely can say you are very easy to talk to. You're very
Thank you.
easy to ask questions to and of. So I am in total agreement with those other people.
No,
Total.
thank you. Thank you.
Now, are you a sushi chef in your own restaurant? Or are you a personal chef? What is your, kind of occupation, I guess I'm asking.
Okay, yeah. So I am a private chef. I do I do a lot of classes, like private booked classes. And I also do private omakase dinners. So, omakase is a term that means chef's choice. And anybody that's really familiar with sushi culture knows that if you want to have an amazing sushi experience, all you do is you go and you sit in front of the sushi chef and say, you know what, you tell me what's good, you feed me what's good. And
Okay.
so yeah, and that's the word omakase means, it's kind of like, chef's choice, but it really just means people associate that with like an over the top experience.
Hmm.
And
Have
that's what I do with plant-based sushi.
Have you written a cookbook or a sushi cookbook? Seems like you should if you haven't.
So I've actually written two.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So my first sushi cookbook, Sushi Secrets, um, was the book that I wish I would have had when I first started
Okay.
trying to learn how to make sushi. This book is aimed for people to make sushi at home. It doesn't require you to go out and buy all of these really expensive Japanese equipment, or if you can't find some certain ingredient, it gives you a lot of tips on what you can use instead, because that was really a barrier to entry for me. I'm reading all these amazing Japanese cuisine books, and they're telling me that I had to have this cypress bowl, that this wooden bowl to put the rice in just to mix it. And I looked it up, and that bowl was $400, and I'm like, that's just the bowl before I have to go buy the this and the this and the this. And I'm like, absolutely, for your own home, you can mix sushi rice in a plastic bowl. It's fine.
Hmm.
It's fine. It really is. But yeah, the idea was really that anyone, whether you lived in Mississippi or Manhattan, could use this book to create good sushi at your home.
And if people want to purchase either one of your books, how can they do that?
Yeah, so they're both available on Amazon. And that would be the way that I would recommend, because they've both been out for a while now. And so it's a little bit harder to find them in the bookstores or in Costco. Not impossible, but it's not something that, they typically carry, because they have newer, more
Right.
recently published books that are coming out, but it's still always available on Amazon. And the second one, Vegetarian Sushi Secrets, focuses all on. It's not entirely plant based, because there's some use of dairy and eggs, but it always gives recommendations for how to get around that if you're completely plant based.
Okay. Now, give us the two names of your books one more time so people will know what they're looking for. And you can get these books on Amazon.com. Can they get them off your website also?
Just Amazon.
Just Amazon. Okay. What are the names of those two books one more time?
Okay, so Sushi Secrets and Vegetarian Sushi Secrets.
Okay. Perfect. Now, the reason I'm asking this question is because I was on your IG and I saw this. You have beautiful pictures
Oh, thank
of
you.
sushi on your IG.
Thank you.
I recommend everyone that is listening and watching to this podcast, please go to her IG. It's Chef Marisa Baggett on Instagram. Your pictures are so beautiful, and the sushi is so colorful, which normally when I see sushi, it's not colorful. So tell me about the sushi that you make that's so colorful and vibrant. That's a great word for it, vibrant.
Yeah. So, that's when I actually started talking about doing more vegetarian sushi, when I was getting ready to write Vegetarian Sushi Secrets, one of the things, people would ask me, they were like, well, what would you even use? And I'm like, are you kidding me? There's so many things. Like when you think about, seafood for sushi, there's a lot of seafood out there, but people tend to use the same things. They tend to use tuna, they tend to use shrimp, crab, and salmon. There's some other things that people use, but those are the four things. That's why typically, and the brown eel. That's why typically when you think of, the other sushi, unless it's a rainbow roll, it's not always so colorful because the colors are limited because of the seafood, which is usually the feature.
Okay.
Vegetables are a whole different ball game.
Oh my.
Vegetables are a whole different ball game. I mean, you have so many things that are red that you can use. You have things that are pink, yellow, orange, white, white and speckled. Like, one of my favorite things to do is drape thin slices of dragon fruit on top of a sushi roll. And so you get this nice, like, it's white, but it's also like these little beautiful speckled black dots, purple cabbage, green things.
Yes.
And it's one of the principles of Japanese cuisine is that you eat first with your eyes. So,
That's how I eat. I eat
uh-huh,
with my eyes
yeah,
first.
yeah.
Yes.
So presentation is very important in any type of Japanese cuisine, not just sushi. I mean, you have, home cooks in Japan that, they are making pretty plates because that is a part of the culture of the cuisine. And so when it comes to incorporating more plants and things, it makes it so much easier, in my opinion, to make something so colorful and so pretty and delicious,
Yeah.
um, because you have so many more options.
Wow. So let's talk about vegan, or is it vegetarian sushi? What is the proper terminology for it?
So I like to say it's plant-based,
Okay.
which, most people take to mean vegan. So it would be appropriate for the sushi that I focus on making would be appropriate for someone who doesn't consume any sort of animal products.
Okay. What is in that? So you have no meat, no seafood at all in your plant-based sushi, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So tell me a little bit more about that, and how did you come to start making plant-based sushi?
Mhm. Yeah. So when I was working in a sushi bar, one of the things, people always ask me a lot of questions, or, they're like talking to me about things. And one of the things that really kind of broke my heart for people, because I love serving people. I think that, anyone that goes into the restaurant industry, that's a fundamental, thing of ours, is that we enjoy serving the people that come in to eat our food. And so the sushi bar that I worked at first was in an area that was kind of a hip part of Memphis. And, a lot of times vegetarians would come in and they're like, hopefully you can help me. When I go to a sushi bar down the street, all I can get is a roll with some avocado or some cucumber. And I'm like, well, that's boring, you
Yeah.
know? And I really felt for them because at the time, I was not vegetarian, but I spent a lot of my from like seventh grade until I was like 25, I was a vegetarian.
Okay.
So I felt their pain. I was like, you cannot just come in here for sushi and just have some rice with avocado. Like that's not enough. Like it just wasn't good enough. And so I started thinking about, well, how can we jazz this up a little bit? And the more I started doing that, the more fun I had with it. And then when I started learning more about, the situation with certain seafoods, I was like, I think that this might be the way.
Hmm.
And there's just so much that can be done. I sit around and sometimes I just sit around and I think about a certain vegetable or a certain fruit, and I'm like, what would I do with this if I could use it for sushi? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you think, I know for you personally, plant-based sushi is trending and that's the direction that you're going. But overall, do you think that plant-based sushi is trending up within that community and that culture?
I think so, and I say that because the worldwide phenomenon of plant based anything trending is starting to kind of take hold,
True.
and I think that the more people that are looking for plant based options, whether they're completely plant based or not, some people just want to incorporate more plant based, which I am a huge fan of, Um, I think that, it's here. It's gonna become more prevalent and it's gonna be here to stay, I think.
Can
Yeah.
sushi be sweet? I know you said that you use, like in your plant-based sushi, you use a lot of fruit, like dragon fruit and things like that. Can it be sweet?
Yeah, I think it can definitely be sweet. Anyone who's had like the eel that's in a lot of traditional sushi, there's like this grilled broiled eel that has this sweetened soy sauce on top. That's a fun flavor that people tend to enjoy. I think that there's a place for sweetness in that in sushi. When I tend to use both flavors though. Like if I'm doing something a little bit more sweet, like for example, I like to put strawberries on top of sushi.
Ooh,
It's very pretty.
yeah.
But then I like to rather than saying this is going to be like a sweet dessert roll, it's more or less like this is like a sweet and savory kind of a thing.
Okay, okay. Do you feel like, as an African American female sushi chef, do you feel like you have created a space for other African American females, Black females who want to become sushi chefs?
I mean, I would love to say yes, but I don't know. I mean, I think that any sort of there've been definitely been times where I've been very, very public. And I think that any sort of representation like that helps anyone's case. It makes it a little bit less novel
Okay.
and more acceptable. And I'm all for that. And I would love to see more in this space because it's an amazing craft. And yeah, I love it.
Yes. Now we're gonna pivot real quick here, but we'll get back to sushi. I promise everyone. But right before we got on the podcast, I was just kind of talking about, you're Black, you're a female, you're a sushi chef. Like, you check all these boxes, and then you stated that you're also Jewish.
Mhm. Yes.
So you are an African American Jewish female, also, which adds just like a total another layer to your existence. So if you could just quickly kind of give me the history on how you became Jewish. And I don't know if that's the correct wording and the correct language for that. And if it's not, I apologize. But, explain to me that transition.
Yeah, so that's that's probably a whole another podcast in itself. But I did embrace Judaism as an adult,
Okay.
um, and right around the same time as sushi. So my sushi and my Jewish journeys are very much entwined. And as a matter of fact, part of um, part of my transition to plant-based sushi has to do with Jewish dietary laws. Because for the first part of my sushi career, I would make anything, including shellfish, this and that, whatever. And then as I became more personally invested in observing the dietary laws, I focused only on kosher sushi. So I became the kosher sushi lady in Memphis, and I did, events and this and that. And, the great thing about plant-based sushi is, anyone can enjoy plant-based sushi.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, I have a shellfish allergy, a severe one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah.
I definitely would be able to eat your plant-based
Mhm.
sushi. So
Yeah.
thank you on behalf of all of us with allergies. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so back to the sushi. I feel like sushi is like exploding in the United States.
Mhm.
Why do you think that is? Which, as we're having this conversation and I'm learning so much from you, the explosion of sushi now has me thinking about, like, what you were saying, that animals, the seafood could become extinct because of the explosion of sushi. So, why do you think the explosion of sushi is so rampant and so taking off in the United States?
Yeah, I think it's because it's it's culture driven.
Okay.
It started off as this thing that that celebrities did, and you see it in a movie or something. It's really cool, and and then it's just it's one of those things that, like, you can't. Well, you can now. You can get it pretty much anywhere. But it used to be, like, oh, it was like an event. Let's go get sushi, and now it's everywhere, which is interesting, because I think the reason now it's everywhere is because it's being portrayed in media everywhere. I can't tell
Mhm.
you the number of really fun Instagram videos that I watch where someone's like, let's make this thing that I saw in this anime. So, like, anime is, Japanese
It
cartoon,
is.
which is huge right
Yes.
now. And so a lot of times, and they're eating, and they're like paying such specific attention and detail to the food that these characters are eating. And so people are like, I want to eat that. And a lot of
Yeah.
times it's sushi.
Okay. Wow. You're right. Anime is blowing up in the United States as well. Like, absolutely. What is it like being a sushi chef in a social media world?
It's interesting.
Okay.
Because I'm thinking back to when you asked me, like, what is a sushi chef, like, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
There are a lot of people that make sushi, and there are a lot of talented people that make sushi in social media, and there are a lot of people that make it that are doing things that I'm like, well, that's interesting. I don't know that I would do that, but and it's popular and people love it. And I think at the end of the day, I'm very comfortable with the idea that there's different there's different levels of making sushi, just like there's different levels of making anything.
Hmm.
I don't say that to be condescending. I say that to say that when people think of sushi, they don't tend to think of that. They tend
Okay.
to think, oh, if you're a sushi chef, you can do blah blah blah, and it's like, well, that's like saying that anyone that can bake a pie can go and make one of these extravagant, like,
No.
cakes that they do, like, on the Food Network. It's like there's different levels. People are differently talented in certain aspects of sushi, and that's the one thing that I wish people understood, because you know the person that's making the sushi in the grocery store is not necessarily, they can't necessarily do the same thing that, say, maybe a sushi chef could. But
Okay.
that's not to say that they also couldn't, because I've
Mhm.
actually met someone whose family owns a chain of, like, grocery stores, sushi making things, and she is not only female, but she's also a phenomenal sushi chef. She just doesn't get the opportunity to do those things outside of, because you can't do the same things in the grocery store.
Right.
But
Right.
there are different there are different levels.
Okay. What would you say is your perfect, your ideal sushi roll?
Ooh, ideal. Well, I go through phases. And right now I don't know why, but I'm stuck on things that are like red and pink.
Okay.
I don't know. And so I've just been playing around a lot with strawberries and rhubarb, and making my own little sushi roe, like little making my own little caviar out of things that are pink, like beet juice, and I don't know. I'm really into like a monochromatic thing, if that makes
It does. I love it. I bet you it's so pretty
it's
and
so pretty.
colorful. As you can tell, I eat with my eyes
There you
first.
go. Yep.
Yeah, I definitely eat with my eyes
Yeah.
first. So, what part of making sushi and being a sushi chef, which I feel like is a tongue twister every time I say it, makes you happy and gives you joy?
Hmm. Oh, that's such a great question. I think knowing that I like to think that I take the spirit of Japanese cuisine and apply that to whatever I do, versus trying to mimic it to the T, um, because you really can't mimic it to the T. Um, and it gives me so much joy to think creatively about these things, and to really like think about the philosophy behind it, and like making sure that I'm applying some of these things to whatever it is that I'm doing. It gives me a lot of joy.
Excellent, excellent. My final question for you, Miss Marissa. Who do you think would make a great guest on the podcast, but you have to help me get them on?
Ooh, okay. So I have a friend. His name is Justin Waldrip,
Okay.
and Justin does virtual Jewish family education. So he tutors teenagers for their bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah ceremonies, teaching them Hebrew, and he helps families who don't have access to a local synagogue. So maybe you're like in a small town in Mississippi. Justin actually helps you virtually, with the education and the Hebrew. He's a really fascinating guy.
I cannot wait to speak to him
Yeah.
because you're my first Jewish person. He will be my second, but more so, he will be the first person that really talked to me and educate me. I noticed that you put an emphasis on bat mitzvah and bar mitzvah, which
Mhm.
lets me know there's a difference.
There is a difference.
I did not know that before. So I will be very excited. That's going to be one of my questions. So thank you. Thank you for that question, Marissa. And thank you so much for being on my podcast. Before you, I'm just going to be honest. I never saw or even heard of an African American sushi chef or even a female sushi chef. I did not know that that existed. And we're in 2024. I didn't know it existed
I
at all.
know. I know.
Like, what is going
I
on?
know. I know.
I did not know you existed, which is horrible.
Well, it's we're
Yeah.
here now. It's
We are
great.
here now. We
It's
have kicked
great.
open the door. We have kicked open the door. But I am sure that there are plenty of people like myself who are listening to this podcast and watching this podcast that did not know either. So I thank you so much for expanding our knowledge and our understanding of not just sushi, but letting us know that African American Black women can and do
Yes,
become sushi chefs. So thank you for
absolutely.
that. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you, all of my listeners, all of my viewers, for tuning in and watching my podcast. You can get this podcast and all of my other podcasts on YouTube Podcasts and Apple Podcasts. And remember, you always have time to listen and learn on the go.